Mitch,
Hello.
how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. So are you taking this test soon?
No, I take it next year.
Okay, so you're just wanting general math. Good.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of sets of ACT. I've got the standard prep tests that we've worked on before. And then I had a student who was a senior and was going to take it soon, and her teacher gave her a special one that was full of a lot more geometry than a typical practice test is. And that's a good idea for a lot of people, because a lot of people who are on fast track end up being 2 or 3 years removed from geometry by the time they take the ACT.
Yeah.
In your case, you probably took geometry last year.
Yeah.
So you're not so removed from it. So I think for you and I, it's probably better if we just go through the regular tests. And maybe next year when you get close to taking it, we'll concentrate more on the geometry end of it, because you'll be even more removed from geometry. And the one thing about geometry is that once you stop taking it, you don't get that many geometry problems. It's not like algebra, where you get algebra in algebra, geometry, algebra 2, precalculus, and calculus. It's full of algebra. But it's not all full of geometry. So, hold on a moment and let me, that was the other test that I thought about working with. You can tell almost every problem is a geometry problem.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do, hold on, let me open up my drawing tablet. All right, let's look at this problem here. Well, let me cover up the answers. You don't need multiple choice here. I want to make sure you know how to do this without multiple choice. Where is that undefined? Conceptually, where is it undefined?
Where that equals 0.
Okay, there's your equation. Give me the equation I can write.
0 equals 1 over...
Let's just work with, it's not where the whole thing equals 0. It's where the denominator equals 0. That's where it's undefined. In other words, that's what has to be true for this thing to be undefined. Okay, now solve this equation.
So 4x squared equals 100. No, the x squared equals 25. So x equals 5.
X equals plus or minus 5.
Minus.
But you're lucky because it said for which non-negative value of x. So they want the positive answer. And that's the only one they even put on there, is the positive one. Okay? Now, let me just bring one other thing up here. Notice also what we're looking at here. And this is a good thing to notice. And people that notice this are going to get it faster. That's the difference of perfect squares, is it not?
Yeah.
So what does that factor into? Square root of that is 10, minus the square root of that, which is 2x, times what? When you factor difference of perfect squares, the other is just always the conjugate of it.
Yeah. So it'd be 10 plus 2x.
Now, notice that when I do it this way, I cannot make the mistake that you made. In other words, now I'm going to set that equal to 0, and I'm going to come up with plus 5. And I'm going to set that equal to 0, and I'm going to come up with minus 5. So I get both solutions for sure if I do it by the difference of perfect squares. And that's always the case. It's always actually the better way to do it, if you can do it. If these two numbers are both perfect squares, better than the way you solved it, just because you don't miss that second solution.
All right.
Next page, 471. What's the slope-intercept form of that equation?
Y equals 3x plus 8.
Careful. When you move that 8 to the other side, it changes signs.
Yeah.
This changes sign, and that changes sign.
Okay. The 27.
Good. This might be the one exception to what I always tell people. I always tell people that shaded region problems are always subtraction problems. And in a sense, this is a subtraction problem because you took the square of the whole thing and you counted only 3/4 of it, right? So you really took the square of the whole thing and subtracted this quarter of it away. What's the perimeter of this triangle? The 3, 4, 5 triangle. What's the perimeter of that?
12.
Okay, 12. And what do we know about similar triangles is they have a similarity ratio where every side has that same ratio to its same side of the two triangles. In other words, here's our situation. It helps a little bit maybe to draw a picture of it. Over here, since this has a 12 perimeter, we must be dealing with a bigger triangle, right? How much bigger?
Yeah. 3 times.
Each side is 3 times bigger. What are my 3 sides over here?
9, 12, 15.
What's the shortest side?
9. All right.
And A minus B equals 20, but they want to know what A plus B is. Now that doesn't mean you have to solve for A or solve for B. All you have to solve for is A plus B. We may not be able to solve for both A and B, but we can certainly solve for A plus B.
All right. So would you plug A minus B in for the A minus B in the actual equation?
Yeah. That's 20.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
What's A plus B equal to?
5.
You got to divide it by both the 4 and the 20.
Oh, you divide it. Okay.
If you multiply the 4 times the 20 first, it makes it, I think, easier. So that's 80. Now I got to divide everything by 80. Okay, so that's what A plus B is equal to, is 40 over 80. I don't see that on the answers. What is it?
1/2.
Okay. So here's our function. The total profit is what P of X is. I'm going to call it P of X because everything else on the other side of this equation is going to be, the only variables are going to be X. This C is a constant, where C is a constant. Okay? So my profit function is this. If 300 units were produced and sold last week for a profit of $1,900, then solve for C. What's the next thing I want to write in here?
So the 1,900 equals 17 parentheses 300 minus...
Yeah, you're right, 300, excuse me.
Minus 10.
And I would recommend writing it exactly like this.
Okay.
Don't leave out a negative sign, don't leave out a parentheses. Now go through and remove your parentheses. Okay.
Yep.
What's that? You can do that one in your head. What's 3 times 7?
Oh, yeah, 51.
Okay.
It would be 51.
Okay. And remove all of those parentheses and tell me what's left.
Minus 3,000 plus C.
This minus sign, that's in the parentheses, so that minus sign applies to the C also.
So minus C.
Okay. And that's going to make a huge difference. Okay? I mean, you understand that. You can't get the sign wrong. You're going to get the answer wrong. Okay, so now we're there. Now what?
Now you move 2,100 over the other side.
Okay. I actually prefer to keep all positive signs.
Okay, so just move 1,900 over the 2,100 and then move C over the other side.
And now in one step, we've got our answer without any nasty negative signs. I could have done it the way you suggested. Doesn't hurt. It's not wrong. It just, whenever you have negative numbers, there's more chance of making a mistake. In other words, that's what I would have gotten from your method. Now I have to go through and divide by 1, negative 1, both sides to get this. So, same number of steps. It's 2 steps, regardless of which way you do it. But avoid those negatives when you can, and you'll make fewer mistakes. Everybody will. Okay. 472. Sorry about the fuzziness here. Oy, I may have to read this one for you. Somebody may have to read it for me. No, I got it. Okay, let me write it so that it's X in parentheses, it's x to the, does that look like a 7? I think it's 7a minus 2.
Yeah.
All
That is.
cubed, if this is equal to x to the 57. And they want to know what a is. What's my next step?
Take the cube root of everything.
It's actually not a bad step, but I don't like it. That's actually a great step, but I still don't like it. What's the cube root of x to the 57th?
No idea.
Exactly. That's why I don't like it. It's actually a number. It's x to the 19th, but I wasn't sure you'd know that. The better way to do it is to distribute this, cube this thing. How do you double exponentiate a variable? What's this thing going to be equal to if I cube it?
Don't you just
Multiply. When you're doing
Oh,
double
just multiply.
exponentiation, you do, remember you're doing one level less. If I've got this, x to the third times x to the fourth, I'm doing multiplication, right? So I'm
Yeah.
going to add the exponents because addition is one level less than multiplication. Well, in this case, I'm not doing multiplication, I'm doing exponentiation. Well, the level that is one less than exponentiation is multiplication. So multiply that 3 times both of these terms.
So x to 21st.
A
Yeah.
minus 6.
Minus 6.
Okay, now, because I have exactly the same base, anytime I have a base to one exponent equals the same base to a different exponent, what can I do?
Can't use the divide.
Equate the exponents. The only way that can be true is if this is true. Now solve for A.
It would be 51 over 21. Or
We're going to
no,
add 6 to both sides.
63. Yeah.
That's 63 over 21, which is 3.
3.
Okay? Now, let's go back to your first idea. I don't know whether we should, but it was actually a very clever solution because you took the cube root of both sides, which left this on the left, and if you knew that the cube root of that was x to the 19th, which it is, now it makes the problem a little bit easier because now it's 7a minus 2 equals 19. You still get a equals 3. So it's a little bit of a clever situation, but that's not the way you want to do it. You always want to multiply those two together and then equate the exponents. If 3 times a number n is added to the 9, the result is negative. Which of the following gives the possible values for n? Can you give me an equation or an inequality to write? Write the first sentence in an equation or an inequality.
Would it just be 3n plus 9?
Is what? The result is negative. How can I write that?
Oh.
Okay? In other words, they made it a little harder. They didn't say is less than 0. They'd have said that. Instead of saying the result is negative, they could have said is less than 0. Then you would have given it to you on a silver platter. So they made it a little bit more complex. But you need to know that when they mean the result is negative, that means less than 0. Okay, now solve that inequality. step by step.
So 3n equal or less than -9. So n less than -3. Okay.
It's answer D.
All right.
Okay. All right. Let me see if I can use a scale that's small enough here. One end is at -5 and 3. Well, I'm going to call that -5 and 3. And the midpoint of the line segment is at 9 minus 1. I'm going to call this 9 minus 1, relatively drawn to scale. That's the midpoint. The other end is somewhere out there in Never Never Land. What are its coordinates? I can do it.
Would it be -5 or
Hold on. Tell me what method you're using to come up with this point right there.
I'm just asking you, would it be -5, -3, or is that supposed to be -5 positive?
Remember that this is the midpoint between these 2 points.
Yeah, I know. The one point.
So along the x-axis, do it x and y. If we look along the x-axis, how far have we traveled to get from -5 to 9?
14.
Okay, so how much further do we have to go?
14.
Okay, add 14 to 9, that gives you this coordinate. Now do the same thing with y.
Is that supposed to be a -3, or is
No,
that supposed to be a
I just
positive?
drew it poorly. I should have drawn it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I did it
Okay.
like this, and here's the point there, and it doesn't really matter how I drew it. In other words, I'm not using the graph to figure this out. I'm doing it algebraically. How far do I go when I go from 3 to -1?
4.
I go down by 4. It's important to know the direction. So how much further do I have to go down?
4.
Which gives me a y-coordinate of,
-5.
that's it. And that's the way to always do those problems. In other words, don't try to figure out what that is and then figure out, is that the midpoint of it? Just go the distance from there to there on the x, add that same distance, and then do the same exact thing on the y. In the standard coordinate plane, what is the radius of this circle that they are giving you here? That is the standard equation of a circle. What's its radius? What's its center?
-3,
No.
negative.
+3, +4.
Oh.
Okay? So we know the equation. Let's write it out. X minus h squared, where h is the x-coordinate of the center. Y minus k squared, where K is the y-coordinate of the center. What goes over here? Does that jog your memory a little bit? This is the equation of a circle. From conic sections,
Is that the
r squared.
oh,
So what is the radius of this circle?
5?
Correct. You didn't need this other information. The only reason I gave it to you was because sometimes if you start to write the general equation out, you remember it all. You should memorize that, for sure. All right, we're going to do a little trig. Very little, but that's not hard. In fact, the trig questions on the ACT are a gift. You don't need to take trig to be able to do these. You just need to know the fundamental basic trig that they've taught you since 9th grade. Okay, there's their angle alpha. I don't draw alphas very well. Not bad. That's S, that's T, that's R. What is the value of the tangent of alpha? And if you look at all the answers, it's some ratio of R to T to S.
It would be J.
Yeah. TOA.
Because it's opposite.
TOA, opposite over adjacent. That's the typical degree of difficulty of the trig questions. In other words, not much.
Okay.
Had a girl once, I was working with ACT, and she had worked with somebody else, and the other tutor told her, just forget the trig questions, don't even worry about them, there's only 4 of them on the test. We're not going to waste our time teaching you that trig. I couldn't believe it when I heard it, that he had told her that. Because the trig questions are the gravy.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that, with very little effort, you're going to get all 4 of those. All right. How would I do this operation? 1 over x minus 3/4. If I said combine those, how would you do it? If I said do this operation, what would you do?
Find a common.
Okay, that's what we got to do. We got to find a common denominator. What is it?
4x.
What goes here?
4.
What goes here?
3x.
And after you put those numerators in like that, it's not a bad idea to make sure we haven't changed anything. In other words, I can tell that that's the same as 1 over x, and that's the same as 3 over 4. So all I've done is add an x to top and bottom. Now we're ready to simplify it. So what's my answer?
4 minus 3x over
E. Parallel
It's
lines,
430.
what's that? Oh, it's 430. Thank you. I will make a note that we got through 31 on 473. 31 on 473. Okay, Mitch, have a good week. I'll talk to you next Tuesday.
All right.
Bye-bye.